I love the feeling I get walking through downtown Raleigh. I used to catch the bus at the station near Moore Square, and every time I turned the corner from one of the neighborhoods peppered around the city and looked up to see skyscrapers surrounded by a seemingly endless grid of buildings, a feeling of awe would draw over me. Raleigh just feels like the capital city. Walking through the streets, the weight and importance of the buildings were palpable as they towered over and surrounded me. The judicial building, the legislative building, and especially the executive mansion. I could vividly imagine how these buildings might connect to my life, and how the decisions made in them affect the people of North Carolina, controlling our lives like invisible strings. Here, in the Raleigh Metro, we are surrounded by the numerous facets the state government possesses. You can imagine my shock then when my friend, as we silently stood on the liminal space between the House and Senate chamber gallery, said, "I didn't know we had state senators." Imagine this young adult who had grown up in Raleigh his whole life and had even taken a tour of the legislative building as an elementary school, not knowing who was in there and what they were doing. Don't worry, I'm not going to name names. I wouldn't want to embarrass him. However, he definitely isn't the only person who lacks knowledge about how state and local government works and who runs it. In a Johns Hopkins University survey in 2018, less than 20% could name their state legislators, and a third couldn't name their governor. I believe the root of this problem is the education system. If students are not taught to see government and their participation in the democratic process as important and worthwhile, then they will grow into adults who feel the same indifference. Throughout my talk, I will explain this problem, why it is important, and offer solutions for it. Youth voter turnout has always been statistically smaller than all other age groups. Moreover, volunteerism among high schoolers hit a 30-year low in 2015. But the 10 states with the highest youth volunteer rates had a civics course requirement for graduation. And studies show that taking a civics education course increases your likelihood to vote by 3 to 6% and increases the rate at which students talk with their peers about current events by 15%. If we want youth that participate in their communities, then we need civics courses and curricula. However, many states do not have this type of civics courses and curricula. According to Sarah Shapiro and Catherine Brown in their 2018 article, A Look at Civics Education in the United States, no state currently provides sufficient or comprehensive civics education. Their bold claim does not change much in 2023. Today, only 7 states require a 1-year-long course of civics or government, and 13 have no civics course requirements at all. They also claim that no state currently has experiential or local problem-solving components in their civics requirements, despite the fact that textbook-based and memorization-based learning had a less than 1% effect on voter turnout. In America, we tell our children, especially the brightest ones, you can be president someday, as the only motivation we give them to have any interest in civics, an interest that is not even nurtured in the education system they are raised in. Why don't we tell them you can be a legislator or a magistrate or a member of the governor's cabinet? You can have a role in government that isn't this vague figure we call the president, who does not know about the issues the people in your community face. You can make a difference here, in your state, in your city, and in your town. We should be equipping all children, no matter what their background, with the skills and tools they need to become leaders of and improve their communities. But what type of education would equip children with these skills? How do we differentiate a high-quality civics education from a low-quality one? Let's use an example. Pretend that you're a teacher who wants to teach about the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service civics test required for naturalization. That sounded boring just saying it out loud. You could theoretically make it more boring by just teaching that it's 128 questions that range from how many Supreme Court justices we have to when we entered World War II and be done with it. Everyone boo that. Boo, that sucks. Or you could use the 6 research and improvement practices outlined in the 2011 report, Guardian of Democracy, the Civic Mission of Schools. Everyone clap for that. Woo! We love research. First, you start with classroom instruction, which is the textbook and memorization-based stuff. Then, you move on to a discussion of current events, like how some states are moving to require students in high school and college to pass this test in order to graduate. This would allow students a space to discuss if they agree or disagree with this policy, especially because it affects them. Finally, you could do a simulation of the democratic process, where everyone in the classroom votes as if they were the General Assembly on if they would pass this bill or not. You can see how just using 3 of these practices increases the quality of the education tremendously, as would the other 3 of community service learning, extracurricular activities, and school governance, which notably take place outside of the classroom, allowing students to explore how civics affects their daily lives. Those organizations who made that report are not the only ones working on solving this issue. Organizations like Civics Now, Learning for Justice, Generation Citizen, Judicially Speaking, Facing History in Ourselves, and the North Carolina House, Senate, and Governor's Page program all do similar work in suggesting curriculum and policy or teaching how to apply civics in real-world situations and to issues within a student's community. We have the resources, knowledge, and community passion to reform civics education. All we need now is support and funding from local, state, and federal governments in order to create better quality civics education. Between 2000 and 2021, federal funding for civics education was slashed by 90% to just $4 million a year. For every $50 the government spent on STEM education, they spent 5 cents on civics. As you can see, I could not physically obtain a $50 bill for this presentation. I mean, who has the money? In this economy? Apparently the government, because recently there has been a renewed interest in civics education by them. The amount of funding went from $7 million in 2022 to $23 million in 2023. A bipartisan bill was also reintroduced into the Senate last summer called the Civic Secures Democracy Act, which would infuse states with over $1 billion worth of funding. We live in a country that, recognizing the worsening political divide, is trying to find a solution through civics education. But even if that bill was passed, it is, in the end, at the discretion of the people who make up your state's General Assembly and school boards at what the actual content of a civics curriculum will be, and if we'd even have one at all. Ricky Hurtado, who was the only Latino member of the General Assembly before he lost re-election. Why, in a state where 12% of the population is Hispanic or Latino, are 0 of the 170 members of the General Assembly representative of me and my community? Did you even know, before I told you just now, that this was the case? How is this ever going to change if we do not talk about it? How can any problem ever be solved if we do not teach our students about it, why it exists, and what we can do to solve it? That is what a good civics education aims to answer. That is why it is so important. That is why I taught myself to see the invisible strings connecting all those government buildings to me, and figured out why I was blind to them in the first place. Now, months later, I see how the simple inclusion of better civics education can mean youth voters turning the tide of an election, a nonprofit getting the volunteers they need to help people, or a Latina kid's interest in government being nurtured. I see how, despite its importance, civics nationwide is neglected. But most importantly, I see the opportunity for change. I see the work people there are doing, and I see the hope they carry that, someday soon, students all over the country will be given the tools they need to create meaningful change. Looking over all of these strings, all connecting to one another and everybody here today, all I can do is hope that I've chosen the right ones to follow, and that now you can see them too. Thank you.